The bathroom light flickered like a dying star as I stared at my raw reflection. My coworker said he liked my natural beauty, so I went to work without makeup to see if he still liked me. For months, I rose at dawn to paint a perfect stranger over my skin. The vanity was a graveyard of expensive foundations and precise brushes. I scrubbed until my cheeks burned pink and my dark circles surfaced. I felt exposed, a secret waiting to be told. I grabbed my keys before the doubt could stop my heart. The office lobby felt 10 degrees colder as I walked past the tinted glass. Usually, the security guard offered a bright smile, but today he hesitated, his eyes searching for the girl he recognized. I kept my head high even as the fluorescent lights mocked every blemish and scar. My desk sat directly across from Josh, the man who fueled this experiment. He was laughing at his monitor, the golden boy of the sales floor. He looked up, and for a split second, I saw the exact moment he realized I was me. Josh did not offer his usual morning compliment or the warm wink that usually carried me through lunch. His gaze drifted to the redness around my nose and the uneven texture of my forehead. He asked if I was feeling terribly ill, or if something tragic had happened at home. I told him I was fine, just tired of the routine. He nodded slowly, his posture shifting as he leaned away from our shared workspace. By 10 o'clock, he had pulled his rolling chair 6 inches further into the corner. The morning meeting was a blur of charts and rejection. Josh usually passed me notes on yellow sticky pads, making me laugh behind my hand. Today, he directed his questions to the manager, never once meeting my naked eyes. I felt a strange shift in the room, as if my lack of concealer had lowered my professional value. The air felt heavy with the unsaid judgments of people who preferred my mask. I reached for my coffee, noticing my hand was shaking under the harsh, white glare of the ceiling. A shadow fell over my cubicle just as I considered hiding in the bathroom. It was Noah from the design department, holding a stack of sketches and a lopsided grin. He did not ask if I was sick or look at my skin with clinical pity. He leaned against the partition, telling me I looked more real than he had ever seen me. His voice was soft, devoid of the sharp performance Josh lived by every day. He stayed for 20 minutes, ignoring the clock while Josh watched us with a tight, confused frown. Noah left a small charcoal drawing on my desk before heading back to the basement. It was a quick sketch of a girl with messy hair and tired eyes, captured with haunting accuracy. He told me he had been too intimidated to speak to the polished version of me. I looked at the drawing and felt a surge of genuine relief, finally dropping the heavy weight of the masquerade. Then I noticed the date on the bottom of the paper was from last year. He had been watching me in the shadows for a long time. The charcoal sketch sat on my desk like a heavy, silent witness. I smoothed the edges of the paper, my fingers tracing the date from a year ago. Noah was still smiling at me from the hallway, his eyes lingering just a second too long. I tucked the drawing into my bag, feeling a cold shiver despite the office heat. Josh walked past without looking, his coffee cup shielding his face from my view. The rejection was sharp, but the sketch was sharper. I decided to visit the design basement to return the drawing and find answers. The stairs were narrow and smelled of old ink and stagnant air. Down there, the lights were dim, casting long shadows across the drafting tables and rolls of blue paper. Noah was hunched over a canvas, his movements fluid and frantic. He didn't hear me approach through the clutter of his workspace. On his wall, a dozen similar sketches were pinned in a neat, obsessive row. He turned suddenly, his face lighting up with that same soft, disarming warmth. I held out the paper and asked why he had drawn me so long ago. He laughed it off, claiming he always sketched the people who moved him. His voice was like velvet, smooth and convincing enough to quiet my racing pulse. He reached out to touch my arm, his thumb brushing against my bare skin. I felt a strange magnetic pull toward his quiet, focused intensity. We left the office together as the sun dipped below the jagged city skyline. Noah suggested a small bistro where the lighting was kind and the wine was cheap. He spoke about art and travel, making me forget the hollow ache Josh had left. I felt seen for the first time in years, truly seen without the mask. He looked at my scars and told me they were like maps of a hidden world. I leaned in, finally letting my guard drop completely. The bistro was crowded, but Noah only had eyes for my unpainted, tired face. He ordered for me, choosing the exact pasta dish I had been craving all day. It felt like a coincidence, a lucky guess from a man who studied details. He told me I was different from anyone he had ever met before. His hand covered mine on the table, firm and grounded. I smiled, feeling a rush of heat that had nothing to do with the wine. As the check arrived, Noah mentioned his mother was hosting a small Sunday dinner. He wanted me there, saying his family valued authenticity above everything else in life. It felt fast, a whirlwind of intimacy that made my head spin with hope. I agreed, thinking of the heavy makeup kit sitting abandoned on my bathroom counter. He leaned over the table to kiss my cheek, his breath smelling of cloves. I noticed he called me Jenny under his breath. I froze as he pulled away to put on his vintage wool coat. He didn't seem to notice the slip, his smile remaining perfectly fixed and bright. I walked to my car in a daze, the cool night air stinging my cheeks. The name Jenny echoed in my mind, a ghost I didn't know yet. I checked my phone to see a missed text from Josh apologizing for his behavior. I ignored it, But I couldn't ignore the feeling of being hunted. The drive to Noah's childhood home was longer than I expected. My bare skin felt tight in the biting wind as I stepped onto the porch. The house was a sprawling Victorian, its white paint peeling like dead skin in the moonlight. I clutched the wine bottle until my knuckles turned white. Noah opened the door, his eyes sweeping over my face with a hunger that felt like possession. He whispered that I looked perfect for his mother. The air inside the foyer smelled of roasted meat and heavy floral perfume. Noah's mother emerged from the kitchen, her hands wiped clean on a lace apron. She froze when she saw me, her eyes widening in a way that made my stomach churn. She didn't offer a hand or a polite greeting. Instead, she called me Jenny and asked why I had finally decided to come home. Noah laughed, but his grip on my waist tightened significantly. Dinner was a theater of forced smiles and clinking silver. I tried to correct her, but the woman simply smiled and passed the heavy gravy boat. Noah talked about my art as if he had painted it himself. Every time I spoke my name, the room went silent for a heartbeat too long. I felt like a ghost haunting a living room I had never visited before tonight. The pressure in my chest was becoming a physical, stabbing pain. I excused myself to find the restroom, desperate for a moment of quiet air. The hallway was lined with old frames, their glass reflecting the dim yellow light. I stopped at a large group photo from a summer holiday years ago. A girl stood in the center, wearing a yellow sundress and a shy, familiar smile. She had my exact height, my shoulder, length hair, and the same small mole near her left eye. It was like looking at a twin. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked closer, noticing more photos hidden behind the larger frames in the back. There were 4 different girls, each styled in the same vintage sweaters and messy buns. They all shared my features, yet their eyes held a hollow, haunted look. Each photo was labeled with a different year, but they were all dressed as the same person. Noah's voice echoed from the doorway, cold and very level. He told me that his mother struggled with the past and its many shadows. He stepped into the hallway, his frame blocking the only exit to the stairs. He said I was the first one who truly understood the depth of his vision. He reached out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was clinical, as if he were adjusting a statue in a museum. I realized he wasn't looking at me but through me. I backed away, my heel catching on the edge of a thick Persian rug. He didn't move. Yet the air in the narrow hallway felt suddenly thin and hot. He told me he had a gift for me in his room upstairs. It was a dress he said would finally complete my natural look for the season. I looked at the photos of the dead-eyed girls one last time. Behind the last frame, I saw a handwritten note that said help. I stared at the scribbled plea for help hidden behind the frame. My blood turned to ice as Noah stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the wall. I needed to leave this house before the front door locked for good. I forced a jagged smile and told him I had forgotten my phone in the car. He hesitated, his eyes darting toward the stairs where the gift waited. The air in the hallway felt like wet wool against my skin. He grabbed my wrist with a strength that didn't match his quiet, artistic persona. He told me the phone could wait until after I saw the blue silk dress. His grip was a cold iron shackle that anchored me to the spot. I looked at the kitchen, where his mother stood washing a single plate. She wouldn't look up, her shoulders hunched as if she were hiding a deep bruise. Noah's breathing became heavy and rhythmic in the small, dark space. I wrenched my arm free and made a dash for the heavy front door. The brass handle was freezing and resisted my desperate, sweating palm for a second. I burst into the night air, the wind stinging my eyes like needles. My car sat at the end of the long, gravel driveway like a life raft. I heard his footsteps pounding on the wooden porch behind me. He wasn't crying or yelling. He was moving with terrifying, silent precision. The engine roared to life just as he reached the driver's side window. I slammed the lock down, my heart hammering against my ribs with every pulse. He didn't bang on the glass or try to shatter it with his fist. Instead, he simply stood there and watched me with a calm, vacant expression. I peeled out, gravel spraying against the underside of the car like gunfire. In the rearview mirror, he remained perfectly still under the porch light. I drove for 20 minutes before my hands finally stopped their violent shaking. I pulled into a gas station and checked my phone with trembling fingers. A message from an unknown number popped up, containing a blurry photo of my own house. The caption asked if the new girl knew about the basement yet. I felt a wave of nausea hit me as I realized someone was watching. I called the only person I could think of in the panic. Josh answered on the second ring, his voice sounding small and remarkably distant. I told him everything through broken sobs, ignoring the pride I had held all week. He told me to stay where I was and keep the doors locked tight. He admitted he had followed Noah after work because something felt off. He had seen Noah buying a set of heavy locks at the hardware store. Josh sounded scared, which made my own terror feel much more real. I sat in the glow of the gas station sign, waiting for a savior. A black car pulled into the lot and parked 3 spaces away from me. The driver didn't get out, but the headlights stayed on, blinding my mirrors. I reached for my gear shift, ready to run once more into the dark. Then, my phone buzzed with a new text from Noah's mother. It said that Jenny was still in the house and I was next. The black car sat idling, its headlights cutting through the freezing mist of the station. I didn't wait for Josh to arrive or for the mystery driver to move. I shifted into drive and floored it, the tires screaming against the slick pavement. My mind looped the text from Noah's mother over and over. Jenny was still in the house. I had seen the photos of girls, but I hadn't seen a living soul. The basement held the truth. I reached the edge of town where the streetlights grew sparse and dim. A sudden realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. The address Noah's mother had messaged wasn't the Victorian house I had just escaped. It was the old property adjacent to the Westfield High Athletic Fields. I redirected my car toward the school, my hands gripping the wheel until they cramped. The isolation of the campus at night felt like a trap waiting to snap shut. The athletic equipment shed was a low, concrete building shrouded in overgrown ivy. I parked far away and approached on foot, my boots crunching on the frozen grass. A single light burned inside, casting a sickly yellow glow through a high, bared window. I found the side door propped open with a rusted weight plate. My breath hitched as I stepped into the shadows. The smell of turpentine and old copper filled the narrow, cold hallway. I found the stairs hidden behind a heavy stack of wrestling mats. They led down into a finished basement that looked like a high-end dressing room. Mirrors lined the walls, reflecting my pale, makeup-free face 100 times. In the center sat a girl with her back to me, wearing the yellow sundress. She was brushing her hair with slow, mechanical strokes. I called out her name, but she didn't turn. She just kept brushing in total silence. I walked around to face her, my heart stopping at the sight. It wasn't a girl at all, but a life-sized silicone mannequin. It was painted with terrifying detail to match the girl in the photos. Every mole, every lash, and even the slight redness around the nose was perfect. My stomach turned as I realized the hair on the doll was real. It was a trophy room for a girl who had disappeared years ago. Then, the door slammed shut. Noah stood at the top of the stairs, his silhouette blocking the dim light. He wasn't crying anymore, and his artistic warmth had vanished into a sharp, cold edge. He held a small glass jar filled with the foundation I usually wore. He told me I was ruining the aesthetic by staying so bare and raw. He started descending the steps, his boots thudding like a drum. He said he had enough pigment to fix me forever tonight. I backed into a rack of vintage sweaters, my hand hitting a heavy metal trophy. I gripped the cold marble base, ready to swing at the man I once trusted. He didn't flinch or stop his slow, methodical walk toward my corner. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a buzzing phone. It was my phone, which I thought was safe in my pocket. He had swapped them at the bistro while I was falling for him, leaving me with a dead weight in my pocket that looked identical to my own device. I stared at the phone in Noah's hand, the screen glowing with a dozen missed calls from Josh. The weight of the metal trophy in my palm felt real, a cold anchor in this nightmare. Noah stepped off the final stair, his shadow devouring the mirrors. He didn't look like a designer anymore. He looked like a curator of dead things. He told me the real Jenny never listened to his advice. I realized the mannequin behind me wasn't just art. It was a blueprint for my replacement. He reached out with a makeup brush, the bristles stiff with a thick, flesh-colored paste. He wanted to fix the imperfections that made me human. I swung the trophy with every ounce of terror in my bones. It connected with his shoulder with a dull, sickening thud. He didn't scream or fall. He simply stumbled, his eyes narrowing as he regained his balance. The jar of foundation shattered on the concrete floor, splashing like wet mud across my boots. He smiled at the mess. I bolted for the stairs, but he was faster than his slender frame suggested. He grabbed my hair, pulling my head back until I saw the flickering basement lights. I dropped the trophy, my fingers clawing at his iron grip. He whispered that I was being ungrateful for the beauty he offered. I saw a row of glass jars on a shelf, each containing a different lock of hair. They were labeled by name and year. My own name was already etched into a blank, waiting jar. The smell of turpentine was making my head swim. I managed to drive my elbow into his ribs, hearing a satisfying crack. He groaned and loosened his hold just enough for me to slip away. I didn't head for the stairs this time. I ran toward the back of the room where a small ventilation window sat high on the wall. It was narrow and choked with dust. I scrambled onto a heavy wooden crate, my nails digging into the rough, splintered cedar. Noah recovered and blocked the path to the exit, his face contorted in a mask of calm rage. He didn't chase me to the window. Instead, he walked over to a heavy breaker box on the wall. He reached for the main switch. His eyes locked onto mine. He told me that the darkness would help me focus on my inner self. The lights hummed and then died with a sharp, final click. I was alone in the pitch black with a predator. I stayed perfectly still, trying to slow the frantic rhythm of my breathing. The basement was silent except for the soft scuff of his boots on the concrete. He was moving toward me, using the sound of my heartbeat to find his target. I felt the edge of the crate and lowered myself to the floor. I crawled toward the mirrors, hoping the faint moonlight from the window would help. My hand touched something cold and wet. It was the spilled foundation from the broken jar. A sudden flash of light blinded me as a phone screen illuminated the room. It wasn't my phone, but a second device Noah had hidden in his pocket. He was filming me, the camera lenses small, black eye reflecting the terror on my face. He said this was the rawest I had ever looked. I saw a heavy metal pipe leaning against the far wall near the mannequin. I lunged for it, my fingers slipping on the greasy, paint-covered floor. I fell hard. Noah laughed, a soft sound that chilled me more than the cold air. He told me that Josh had stopped looking for me an hour ago. He showed me a text on the screen, sent from my number to Josh. It said I was fine and that I wanted to be alone with Noah. My heart sank as I realized he had systematically cut my lifelines. I was a ghost in the system before I was even dead. He knelt beside me, his hand cold. I kicked out, my heavy boot connecting with his shin. He cursed and dropped the phone, the light spinning across the floor like a searchlight. I scrambled to my feet and grabbed the metal pipe, swinging it in a wide, desperate arc. It hit the mannequin, shattering the silicone face into 100 jagged pieces. Noah let out a primal scream of grief, as if I had struck a living woman. He scrambled toward the ruins of the doll, weeping. I didn't wait to see his next move. I used the spinning light of the phone to find the stairs and took them 2 at a time. I burst through the shed door and into the freezing night air. My car was gone from the spot where I had hidden it, the gravel driveway empty and dark. A set of headlights appeared at the end of the long school road. I waved my arms, screaming for help until my throat felt raw. The car accelerated, the engine roaring with a familiar, high-pitched whine. The car screeched to a halt, the tires biting into the loose gravel. I shielded my eyes from the blinding glare, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The door swung open and Josh scrambled out, his face pale with a mix of shock and terror. He didn't ask questions about my ruined hair or the blood on my boots. He just shoved me into the passenger seat and slammed the door. He looked behind me toward the shed where Noah was likely emerging. We roared away from the athletic fields, the engine screaming as Josh pushed the car to its limit. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was nearly 4 in the morning. My hands were stained with foundation and dust, shaking so violently I couldn't hold them still. Josh told me he had found my car abandoned 3 miles back near a ravine. He had seen Noah's black sedan circling the block like a shark in dark water. I was safe, but the fear remained. Josh turned onto the main highway, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds. He apologized again for the way he had treated me at the office earlier that week. He admitted he was a coward who only cared about appearances until he saw the danger I was in. I didn't care about his apologies right now. I only cared about the lock Noah had on my life. I reached into the glove box, my fingers searching for any scrap of cloth to wipe away the grime. My fingers brushed against a heavy, cold object wrapped in a thick wool cloth. I pulled it out, expecting a tool or a flashlight to help me see. It was a framed photograph Josh had taken from Noah's Victorian house earlier that night, a piece of evidence he had kept hidden to protect himself as much as to spite Noah, ensuring he always had leverage over his former friend. The image showed Josh and Noah standing together in a high school soccer uniform, smiling like brothers. I realized then that their rivalry was not about me at all. They shared a history I never knew existed between them. Josh saw me looking and his grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles turned white. He admitted that they both loved the same girl years ago, the original Jenny from the photos. She hadn't just moved away. She had vanished after a party they both attended. They had been blaming each other for her disappearance for a long time. I was just the latest prize in a sick game of memory. The car felt smaller, a cage built from old lies. The headlights of a black sedan appeared in the distance, gaining on us with terrifying speed. Noah was not giving up his pursuit of the girl who finally broke his dolls. Josh shifted gears, his jaw set in a line of grim and desperate determination. He told me he wouldn't let Noah take me like he took the others. I looked at Josh, seeing the same obsessive glint in his eyes that Noah had shown. I wasn't being saved by a hero. I realized I was caught between 2 men who saw me as a ghost rather than a person. I reached for the door handle, but the child safety locks were engaged. Josh told me to stay calm and trust him to handle his old friend. He began to slow down, steering the car toward the edge of the steep river bridge. The black sedan was right on our bumper now, chrome glinting. The power balance shifted as I saw their shared, silent plan. Josh rolled down his window and signaled to the car behind us with a rhythmic tap. The black sen slowed in unison, maintaining a perfect, chilling distance from our rear. They were communicating without words, a language born from years of shared secrets and hidden sins. I felt a cold realization wash over me like ice water. Josh hadn't come to rescue me from a predator. He had come to reclaim his half of the dark, heavy prize. I grabbed the heavy frame of the photo and smashed it against the side window. The glass spider-webbed, but didn't shatter under the first desperate blow of my hand. Josh reached out to grab my arm, his face twisting into something unrecognizable and cruel. He told me I was ruining the ending he had worked so hard to create. I struck the glass again, my vision tunneling as the bridge rails whipped past. The car began to veer toward the dark. The window finally gave way with a loud, crystalline snap that filled the cabin with wind. I didn't think about the fall or the freezing water waiting below the high bridge. I scrambled through the opening just as the black sedan rammed into our side. My body hit the pavement, tumbling into the shadows near the pedestrian walkway. As I looked up, I saw both cars stop and two doors open. They weren't fighting each other anymore. They were both looking for me. Pain flared through my shoulder as I scrambled behind a concrete bridge pylon. Above me, the dual hum of idling engines vibrated through the metal structure. Josh and Noah stood in the center of the road, their silhouettes merging into a single shadow. They weren't arguing, they were coordinating. I realized my natural beauty wasn't a gift to them. It was the bait they used to keep their dark secret alive. I had to disappear before they reached the railing. The river roared below, a black abyss of freezing current and jagged rocks. I found a narrow maintenance ladder bolted to the side of the bridge. My fingers were raw, the skin stinging from the gravel and cold wind. I descended into the mist, moving by touch alone. A flashlight beam swept over the water, narrowly missing my boots. They were checking the drop to see if I had jumped. I held my breath until my lungs felt ready to burst. I reached the muddy bank and ducked into the dense, skeletal brush. I reached into my pocket and felt the cold glass of the backup foundation jar I had grabbed from the basement shelf. It had survived the fall, a heavy reminder of the mask I once wore. I smeared the beige paste over my face, using the thick cream to camouflage my pale skin. In the dark, the perfection I once craved became my only armor. I moved like a ghost through the undergrowth, heading toward the highway. A police cruiser sat at the intersection, its blue lights painting the trees in rhythmic pulses. I emerged from the woods, my face a muddy mask of cosmetics and grit. The officer stepped out, his hand hovering near his holster as he stared at me. I told him there had been an accident on the bridge. I didn't mention Josh or Noah by name yet. I just asked for a phone that wasn't the dead weight Noah had slipped into my pocket to replace my own. He led me to the warm, safe back seat. The sun began to bleed over the horizon as I sat in the station lobby. My face felt stiff and dry, the foundation cracking with every wary blink. Josh and Noah were gone, their cars abandoned near the river like empty shells. Following the directions I gave the sergeant, the detectives found the real Jenny's remains hidden beneath the wrestling mats in the athletic shed basement, confirming the dark secret the two men had shared since high school. They said my makeup-free face was the only thing that broke their long cycle of lies. I finally looked in the mirror and saw a survivor. I walked out into the morning air, the light feeling warm on my bare skin. I reached into my bag and threw the glass jar into the trash. There would be no more 5 AM alarms or curated illusions for men. I didn't need their validation to know I was real. My scars were visible now, and I wore them with a quiet, fierce pride. I had nearly reached the station parking lot when a shadow moved. I was almost at the edge of the station lot when a figure stepped out from the morning mist. As I turned the corner, I saw Josh's sister waiting by my car with a familiar, terrified smile. She handed me a set of keys and whispered that she had been waiting years for someone to survive them.